Behind every interchange of your body for money, there is a story.
You know, we're not here for our own sakes, because all the harm and damage that's been done to us is done already, and we can't undo one moment of that. What we're trying to do is to educate people so that we can prevent against it happening to people in the here and now and into the future.
There were so many times that I could have died, and there's so many deaths that I've witnessed at the hands of sex buyers and pimps to people that I loved and cared for. I said to myself, you know, my voice has to matter. There has to be a reason that I'm not dead yet. And with that in mind, I said, you know what? I feel like somebody's going to benefit from hearing me talk one day.
So that's really what it's about for me. It's about telling people the truth about prostitution. Because when people actually do know the truth, they take a very, very different view.
I'm not dead yet.
Prostitution is a global trade dealing in sexual access to the bodies of an estimated 40 million women and girls worldwide. The true figure may well be much higher. The trauma of this repetitive, ritualistic violation is well documented and has been shown in some studies to meet or exceed the rates of PTSD found in combat veterans. This trauma can be treated, but it can never be reversed. It continues, often with large-scale public support, every single day. Prostitution, precisely because it is compensated, is the world's last acceptable form of sexual abuse.
You can be in prostitution never having been sex trafficked, but when you are trafficked, it's usually for the purposes of sexual exploitation and prostitution. So really, sex trafficking is the vehicle that drives people into the sex trade.
We talk about payment here, right? What we're really talking about is compensation. What we're really talking about is a bribe. The cash that's passed over in any prostitution exchange is a bribe. It's I'm giving you money so that I don't need to hear your no, you know? So you're not buying sex, you're buying silence.
The reality is that exploitation is happening in every single state of the United States of America. That's the reality.
Prostitution is not characterized by any sort of sexual mutuality or reciprocity. Rather, it's based on specifically that unequal power and control, where one person's pleasure is met at the expense of another person's well-being, including their physical and psychological health. There are three primary legislative responses to the social issue of prostitution.
Full criminalization, which is the current model that is instated in all of the 50 states, with the exception of a few counties in Nevada where brothels are legal.
This is where all parties that are caught engaging in the system of prostitution are caught and arrested, and usually have a criminal sentence or sentenced to jail time.
What that means is if you're caught as the person selling yourself, or quote unquote, if you're the person that is putting out ads or walking the streets or in the strip clubs that are engaging in this, you get arrested, as well as the individuals who are purchasing sexual access to you, as well as the individuals who may be trafficking you, i.e. a pimp or some type of manager or something like that. So everybody involved gets arrested.
The reality is that full criminalization has been failing. Full criminalization actually has been impacted like survivors or people who are engaged on the sex trade because they lack other opportunities. So we are profiling, we are incarcerating the people who are trying to survive, the people who have been coerced, the people who have been forced. And we haven't really put an effort to really address like buyers, like the demand, like abusers, perpetrators, and traffickers.
I think that it's a viciously unfair system. It's just horrendous. I mean, the pressure that it puts on people who are already exploited to then doubly punish them, to criminalize them for their own exploitation, is absolutely appalling.
So then you have this model that is more recently introduced, known as the full decriminalization model.
Full decriminalization eliminates laws and penalties associated with all of the prostitution trade. So this means that sex buying, pimping, brothel owning, and the sale of sexual acts all become legal. After parts of Australia fully decriminalized the sex trade, the number of brothels in Sydney tripled in 4 years. Demand went up, and so third-party exploiters stepped in to meet that demand. In 2003, New Zealand decriminalized sex buying, pimping, and selling. A follow-up report revealed that the number of unregulated brothels had increased in New Zealand, and that there were significantly high reported incidents of violence, up to and including murder, against women who were exploited in the sex trade.
The women that I met in New Zealand who'd been working in street outreach for 16 years told me that in the immediate years after the passing of full decriminalisation, that the numbers on the streets began to grow noticeably, and that in the 16 years that they had been providing services, they had seen a mushrooming of the sex trade, from dealing with 6 to 8 women on street to in the region of 50 to 60. And that expansion had begun directly within 6 months of the legislative change.
Amsterdam, which implemented a legalization regime, ended up having to close half of their legal prostitution venues because investigative reports found that they were run by organized crime. As part of a very large investigation, the Dutch National Police Service documented that criminal gangs working as pimps and bodyguards had been using extreme violence against women in the legal, licensed, supposedly safe sector of the sex trade for years. And that report indicated that 50 to 90% of the women in the 3 cities in the study were actually sex trafficked.
The reason why people are supportive and pushing for full decrim is the idea that by fully decriminalizing the sex trade, you help the person that's exploited in the trade. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing, and everybody agrees that the person that is exploited should not be arrested for their own exploitation. The problem with that is that at the same time, when you're fully decriminalizing that person, you're also decriminalizing the person that's buying them, the person that is selling them, etc., and all the actors involved. So that's why I personally don't support full decriminalization, because it's great to decriminalize me, the person who's been exploited, but it's also not okay to at the same time decriminalize the person who put me into the sex trade in the first place.
There is a major debate between people who see prostitution as a harmless form of labor that should be fully decriminalized versus people who see prostitution as a form of severe gender-based violence that should be addressed using the equality model. From 2012 to 2013, I lived in Sweden, and I was there researching what at the time was called the Nordic model. Since it's been adopted by a number of countries, it's now referred to globally as the equality model. And I was there on a Fulbright fellowship, and I had the opportunity to interview tons of people, folks who were involved in the crafting of this model and in implementing this model. Sweden was the first country to recognize that prostitution's neither work nor a victimless crime, but is rather a severe form of gender-based violence. In 1999, Sweden passed the Peace for Women Act, and with this act, Sweden criminalized sex buying, trafficking, pimping, and brothel owning, and the law simultaneously decriminalized people who were being bought and sold in the sex trade. The equality model recognizes that prostitution, the commercial sex trade, is exploitative and is a form of gender-based violence.
In addition to keeping the penalties for those who perpetuate it, it also has a component of aftercare services specifically for the person who's exploited.
If anybody could have said to me when I was in prostitution, Rachel, we can help you get off the coke, we can help you with childcare, we can help you go back to school. If that had been put to me as a genuine array of supports that I could access, if that had been put to me, I would not have been in prostitution, I don't think, for any length of time at all, because
my deepening problems, my addiction, my distress, my trauma, the sense of disconnection from the world, the sense of sadness that I could not be or do the simplest things that I saw other people be and do all around me all the time. I know I would have grabbed that chance, but I think that it's very important that there's a flexibility in the services.
The equality model is a collaborative effort focused on changing social norms that enable prostitution to flourish. Unlike the full decrim model, which has not been adopted in many countries, the equality model has been adopted in 7 other countries and is being considered for adoption in more because of its successes. It's been very successful at decreasing the size of the commercial sex trade, so preventing more folks from being pushed and pulled into the sex trade. It decreased significantly the number of sex buyers. It halved the number of sex buyers in Sweden. It has helped folks who are in the sex trade to access services that they need to exit and heal. In Norway and Iceland, they were inspired by the success that they saw in Sweden, and they also adopted the equality model. All 3 of these countries have made equality model legislation a part of their gender equality policies, and every year these 3 countries are ranked among the top 5 of the World Economic Forum's Index for Equality between Women and Men. It's important though to understand that the equality model is a major threat to the big business interests that profit from the sex trade. So there is a multi-billion-dollar sex trade that has significant power and works behind the scenes, pushing for complete legalization or full decriminalization. And there's a lot of money that's invested from the sex trade into lobbying against and discrediting the equality model. So I always encourage folks to keep that in mind when they're reading very biased media.
I really think that there's a lot of good can be done by young people, but they have got to understand what it is that they're dealing with.
I saw, folks who were the most vulnerable being targeted and manipulated into the sex trade, and then I saw the sex trade and media and academia flipping this issue in such an unbelievable way to present it as though it were an empowering experience, a liberating experience for the people who were having their bodies bought repeatedly for sex by men.
I'm looking at people who are 20, 25 years younger than I am, and I'm looking at them doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. There are so many of them out there who are calling for what they would call sex workers' rights. And they don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand what they're legitimizing. They don't understand that if you decriminalize every pimp in the land and every exploiter in the land, you're going to absolutely trash the lives, not only of the young people who are living prostitution right now, but of the generations coming up behind them. And you're going to do so much harm and damage, and the vast majority of it is going to fall on the shoulders of socially vulnerable people.
There's so many people that are being hurt the same way I was when I thought that I was this ostracized outlier.
I want people to be seen as people, and I want people to reach a point where they are able to fight and really, really, really believe that they can accomplish their goals.
For me, I was like, there are people that have gone through this, and there are people that want to know more and help. And after that, that was it for me. I've been doing advocacy work for 11 years now, and I haven't stopped since.